There's a reason you almost never manage to swat a fly. The strange thing is, most of us have never really stopped to ask why. We simply accept the fact that a tiny buzzing insect somehow disappears at the exact moment our hand reaches it. But that shouldn't happen. After all, it's just a fly, a creature smaller than your fingertip with a brain no larger than a grain of rice. And yet, time after time, it manages to escape animals millions of times larger than itself. So what is actually happening in that split second before your hand strikes? Because when scientists began searching for the answer to that seemingly simple question, they discovered that one of the most hated insects in your home was hiding secrets far stranger than anyone expected. And that story begins with something almost everyone has experienced, but very few people truly understand. To understand that, we need to go back to the moment just before the fly disappears. Picture a familiar scene. A fly lands on the edge of your kitchen table. It sits perfectly still. There's no sign that it knows you're there. You move a little closer, carefully judge the distance, and then swing as fast as you can. But by the time your hand reaches the spot where the fly was sitting, it's already gone. Almost like magic. They seem to take off at exactly the last possible moment. Not too early, not too late. Somehow, they always appear to know precisely when it's time to leave. For years, scientists were fascinated by that question too. Was it simply a matter of being fast, or was something else happening behind the scenes? To find the answer, researchers did something the human eye simply can't do. They filmed flies using ultra-high-speed cameras capable of capturing thousands of frames in a single second. And when the footage was played back in slow motion, something strange appeared. The fly wasn't waiting until the swat got close before reacting. In fact, it began preparing to leave almost the instant the first sign of movement entered its field of view. Its front legs shifted position. Its body leaned backward. Its wings began to unfold. Everything happened in such a precise sequence that researchers compared it more to an airplane preparing for takeoff than a panicked escape. But how could a brain smaller than a grain of rice do something like that? The answer lies in how flies process information. The human brain doesn't experience the world as a perfectly continuous stream. Instead, it constantly gathers visual snapshots from its surroundings and stitches them together into what we perceive as motion. Flies do the same thing. They just do it much faster. In the time it takes your brain to process part of a movement, a fly's brain has already processed it multiple times. In other words, it receives more frames of the world than you do. And when an animal receives more information within the same amount of time, the world around it appears to slow down. Biologists sometimes refer to this as subjective time perception. Different animals experience the flow of time in slightly different ways. For a turtle, the world may pass by relatively quickly. For a bird of prey diving from the sky, even the smallest movement of its target becomes much easier to detect. But for a housefly, that advantage is taken to an entirely different level. Imagine watching a football game at normal speed. Meanwhile, the fly is watching the same game with more frames, more detail, and more time to react. Not because time is actually slowing down, but because its brain is taking in the world faster. Suddenly, the battle between you and a fly starts to make a lot more sense. You thought you caught it by surprise. The fly saw the entire attack coming. But that's only half the story. Because spotting danger is useful only if you can actually avoid it. And that's where the housefly becomes truly remarkable. Most animals move in fairly predictable ways. They accelerate forward, turn left, or turn right. A fly is different. It can change direction almost instantly. It can dart sideways, shoot upward, and perhaps most impressively of all, it can fly backward. Everything happens so quickly that the human eye can barely keep up. In a sense, a fly doesn't move through the air like an airplane. It maneuvers more like a helicopter. That's why so many seemingly perfect swats end in failure. The target doesn't simply disappear. It leaves in a direction your brain never had time to predict. And suddenly, a battle that humans have been losing for thousands of years starts to make a lot more sense. Maybe the problem was never that we're too slow. Maybe our opponent was simply built exceptionally well for this particular fight. But if a fly's ability to escape your swat is already surprising, the next secret is even stranger. Because when a fly lands on your kitchen table, your countertop, or a piece of ripe fruit, it isn't just standing there. It's doing something most people never imagine. It's tasting the world beneath its feet. Flies can actually taste food with their feet. It sounds ridiculous, but that's not a figure of speech. It's literally true. Along the bottoms of a fly's feet are thousands of tiny chemical receptors capable of detecting sugars and other nutrients. In other words, what we use our tongues to taste, a fly can sense with its very first step. And that's where things start to get interesting. Imagine a piece of ripe fruit sitting on a kitchen counter. To us, it's simply a piece of fruit. But to a fly, it's a cloud of chemical signals spreading through the air and coating the surface. The moment it lands, it almost instantly knows whether that spot is worth staying for. No biting, no sampling, no tasting with a mouth, just standing on it. Suddenly, a familiar sight begins to look very different. The fly isn't just wandering around on your food, it's analyzing it, evaluating it, making decisions about it. In a strange way, every landing is like a quality inspection that lasts less than a second. And once it finds what it's looking for, it faces a problem that most animals never have to deal with. It knows exactly where the food is, but it can't chew it. And that's when the story becomes truly strange. Flies have no teeth. How can a creature survive if it can't chew? After all, most of the food a fly encounters is solid. A piece of ripe fruit, a crumb of bread, or leftovers sitting on a kitchen counter. Finding food is easy, but finding food doesn't necessarily mean being able to eat it. And that's where evolution came up with a remarkably strange solution. Instead of bringing food into its body to digest it, the fly does almost the opposite. It brings its digestive system to the food. Before eating, a fly often releases a small drop of digestive fluid onto the surface. The enzymes in that liquid begin breaking the food down from the outside, turning nutrients into a form the fly can absorb. And then, just a few moments later, the mixture is sucked back up. In a sense, the fly digests its meal before it actually eats it. What sounds like a serious disadvantage turns out to be a surprisingly effective strategy. No teeth, no jaws, no chewing, just turning food into liquid before bringing it into the body. And that ability allows flies to take advantage of almost any food source they come across, from ripe fruit, sugary drinks, and flower nectar to tiny scraps that most other creatures would completely ignore. And perhaps that's why, for a fly, the line between an appealing meal and something we find disgusting barely exists. Whether it's a fresh meal sitting on the table, a piece of sweet ripe fruit, spoiled food, or material that most animals would avoid entirely, a fly can still find something worth feeding on. And that's exactly what makes it one of nature's ultimate opportunists. Beyond their almost uncanny ability to dodge a swat, flies possess another remarkable advantage: their ability to grow and reproduce at an astonishing rate. An adult housefly typically lives for only 15 to 30 days. Even the longest-lived individuals rarely survive beyond 2 months. And yet, within that short span of time, a single female fly can leave behind thousands of descendants for future generations. And that may be the real reason they always seem to be around us. Whether we like it or not, houseflies will probably continue living alongside humans for a very long time. They followed us from the earliest settlements and farms to the modern cities we live in today. And chances are, they'll continue doing so far into the future. Maybe tomorrow, another fly will land on your dining table. Maybe it will discover your lunch before you even sit down, and then disappear before you have time to react. But this time, at least you'll know what's really happening. So when this video ends, take a moment to look around the room. If you spot a fly resting on a window, walking across a countertop, or buzzing quietly in the corner of your kitchen, spend a few seconds watching it closely, and reflect on all the fascinating secrets it has been hiding in plain sight. Secrets that most of us never knew were there. So what about the houseflies where you live? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the hidden world of nature, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next discovery. Until next time.